This is Casey, and I cover Blood and Treasure for so many shows. I'm talking with one of the creators, Matthew Federman. Thanks for coming on the show and talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start off with one of the things that I really enjoy most about the show, and it's the fact that it has a little bit of everything. There's action, there's drama, romance, comedy, history. Was that always your intention to have a little mix of everything in the show?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of my writing partner, Steven Sky, and I, just our style, I think, is a combination of all the things that we love. And so we can write seriously if we need to, but it's a lot more fun when you can kind of throw 10 pounds of story into a 5-pound bag and just, let it be a lot of different things. And if you can make all those things work, then, you can bring a lot of different people together who might want to watch the same show because they're each getting a little bit of what they want.
In these past couple episodes, I noticed that we're seeing a lot more out-of-character moments, especially with Danny and Agent Carlson in the last episode. I'm wondering if we're going to see a little bit more of this in the future episodes.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's become a cliche to say something is a 13-hour movie or whatever, but because it's definitely a serialized TV show, but we are telling a 13-hour story, and so we boarded it with arcs from episode 1 through episode 13 that we're really taking these characters on a journey. And so for us, it's like every episode is a part of that journey, and seeing people stepping out of their comfort zones and either revealing a part of them that you didn't know that they had, or them starting to change into something else is always been the intention of the show, because it's about, it's not just an adventure where you go places. It's an adventure where the characters themselves are changing the whole way because of the adventure.
Now, Mark, who plays Father Chuck, he has a podcast, Pod and Treasure, and he always starts his podcast with a little bit of a history lesson. And I find myself saying, wow, I never knew that before. And I'm wondering if there's any part of the research that you did for the show that you found yourself saying, oh, that's interesting, I never knew that.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think for us, the sweet spot of history is something where it's a brand name thing that the audience is kind of aware of, but then the more they dig into it, the more they're like, oh, but I didn't know this whole part of it. So, for instance, when we knew we were going to be going after Anthony and Cleopatra, and that was going to be our treasure of the season, and as we started digging into them, we found out about this cult of Serapis that existed in their time, and that was a whole thing we'd never known about. And when we started thinking about like having a secret group on our show, we were like, okay, well, it would be cool for, instead of just making up a group out of whole cloth, what if we take something true that this cult existed, and is very much tied to Cleopatra's dynasty, and then they just never died out, and they became a different thing over time. They became this brotherhood. And so that's an example of how, like, for us, it's, we don't have time on the show to do a deep dive into all of the history that we're playing with. Sometimes we only get like a couple lines, but our hope is it's those couple lines are interesting enough that people do their own deep dive after the show and start to realize, like, oh, there's, the Chrysos Circle is a real thing. And that was a real group of heroes that was there that, history doesn't talk about very often. And, every episode has probably one of those things that's some strange bit of history that we never knew before we researched it.
Now, a lot with the history in the show, we get to see some flashbacks with history. And also, we did get to see a flashback with Danny and Lexi. And I'm wondering if we're going to see some future episodes where there's a little bit more flashbacks with Danny and Lexi.
Yes. So in the original version of the show, like in all of the scripts, there are flashbacks in every episode. That was getting into a different character or a different part of the backstory. And then as the show was coming together in the editing, we were finding either some episodes we didn't have time for it, some episodes it was just throwing off the pacing. So we had to take out a bunch of those flashbacks. But we kept in the ones that we absolutely needed for the story we were telling. And so there's going to be, some pretty important flashbacks in the second half of the season. And then also there's a thing we're hoping to do, and we're trying to actually get it out this weekend, which is we're going to try to put some of those flashbacks that we couldn't air online. So if you're someone in the audience who is interested in that kind of thing, you can see the stuff that we weren't able to air, but we shot, and it looks great. It was color corrected, and so it doesn't look like DVD extras, how they sometimes look like a whole different thing because they didn't put any of the money into actually making it a finished product. Like, these were all finished because they were in cuts before we removed them. So we're hoping to get that out into the world.
When you say online, would that be like links through Twitter?
Yeah, I think that, and this the reason I'm being I'm not being cagey because I'm a con person. We haven't actually figured it out yet because we're just on the verge of it right now. But I think the simplest version will be we will put them out on different forms of social media, and that will scale up to a version where it actually gets hosted on the CBS.com website with the other stuff from the show, and so people can find it there as well.
Okay. Now, in the show, there always seems to be like an ongoing tug-of-war theme with like good and bad in the series. And many times we're left wondering, well, who is really good and who is really bad? Like right now, I'm a little concerned about Jay. I'm not sure what side he's on. And, you know, Fabi, I just have him questioning his actions. And, of course, the Brotherhood, which is just full of mystery. I'm curious if we're going to find out what these characters are really up to in this season.
Yeah, so the 13 episodes tells a full story. So if there was never any more show, it should be. I mean, I think it's very satisfying. I hope people feel the same way. We didn't have to do the thing a lot of shows have to do, and I've worked on these shows where it's episode 18 of 22, and you're just dancing in place because you don't, you know what I mean? Like you don't have enough story for 22 episodes, let alone you can't end the show. We can make the show where every season can feel like an ending of a show. And then the next season, we just do another story. We talk about it as being a summer novel, so it's like, you know, of a Danny Lexi series of summer novels where you can keep following these characters on new adventures, but we'll finish the stories as we tell them. So I think you'll get a pretty good sense of everybody by the end of the season. And, you know, for us, we like playing with the fact that, you know, Danny and Lexi, the thing that defines them is so much of their kind of moral perspective on the world. With Danny first being very black and white and Lexi being very gray. And all the characters, you know, from Danny being on one far end of the spectrum to Farouk being at the far other end of the spectrum, being very clearly a bad person. And everybody else is in the middle somewhere. And it's just a question of where in the middle are they and how much is their self-interest driving things or how much is it just you know, for instance, like Lexi has a moral code. She just has a different moral code than Danny, but she's not necessarily a bad person. And you know, is that what's going on with the Brotherhood, or are they just bad guys who are every now and then? Are they bad guys who are sometimes doing good things, or are they good guys who are sometimes doing bad things? You know, that's the stuff that we think is the interesting, fun stuff to play with Danny and Lexi kind of in the middle of it, both trying to figure out where they stand.
Now, you mentioned this being like a summer novel. Did you always plan on this being a summer show and having 13 episodes?
When we first sold it, we sold it as a fall show in fall of 2016, and that was going to be a normal 22-episode show. But we had always talked about it being shot around the world and being a very big show. And when it came time for them to pick up their fall stuff, they said, you know, this isn't really right for CBS in the fall. We have a certain brand identity for the fall. But the summer shows that we like to do are much kind of like, they're just what you guys always talk about this show being, where they're big and splashy and they're serialized. And so we want you guys to redevelop this show as a summer show. And that at first seemed like bad news because usually, you know, when someone says redevelop something, it just goes into a hole that it never comes out of again. But in this case, they really did. They were as good as their word. And Danny and Lexi were always in the story. Farouk was always in the story. That kind of the arc of the season was always the arc. But we were going to have to do that thing where, you know, we'd have an episode 18 where we would just be dancing in place because the arc wasn't ready yet to finish. And all we did was we pulled out all of the dancing in place and we just said, let's just do the arc as 13 episodes. And now we don't need to waste any time. We can just be a chugging freight train of story the whole time. And so it's really the best thing to happen to the project was us hearing no for fall and yes to summer, because it really unlocked what the show should be and then also how we could make it, because we couldn't have made 22 episodes in as big as we have these 13. We wouldn't have been able to go around the world like we did. It would have changed everything, I think, in a negative way. So we got very lucky that it fell in the way it fell.
Great. Well, I know you're very busy, so I wanted to close with saying thank you very much for being so active on social media and live tweeting the shows, because that really means a lot to the fans. Oh,
you know what? Like Steve and I don't know if you know how much you know about our careers, but we the first kind of big fandom we encountered was on Jericho, where we were on there, for the whole run of it. And the show was canceled, and it felt like it was, it was a show that had a lot more life in it than what it got. But it was canceled, and we were all really bummed, and we felt like we had something really special that could have went. And then the fans started a campaign, and we were all, out of town at the time it started. We were, just hearing about it, and they're doing this thing with nuts, and they're sending nuts to people, and we all felt like, man, that's great. It's great that it connected with these people. That's awesome, but we don't want people wasting their money on us. Like, there's nothing that's ever going to happen with this, and we kind of felt great and kind of bad at the same time. And then, thankfully, they didn't listen to us because they just kept doing it, and it got the show brought back again. And it's a thing that, like, I think forever connected me to the power of fandom and an appreciation for the people who put their passion in as a viewer, and the way that they can affect a show, and the way that they become that the show is a combination of the creators and the fans. I think in a positive way. I don't think that means the fans dictating what the show is. I think, we're still here to tell a story.
Right.
But I think understanding that you're telling a story of people who are passionate about that story and doing it respectfully, even if you have to kill a character because the story requires it, doing that respectfully and not doing it flippantly, and not forgetting that there's people out there who this is really important to. And so I think from then on, after that experience, we've always been very engaged with fans, and we love that we have now created a show that has a little bit of that spark for people, and
right.
Hopefully it grows.
That's great. Well, here's hoping for another season 2 on Blood and Treasure on CBS. If you're not tuning in, tune in on Tuesdays at 10 p.m. and you can read my recaps on so many shows. Thank you, Matt, for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you.